Hello, my friends. Good to see you again. This is 7 English Bible School. Thanks for joining us. And once again, your presence means a lot to me. God bless you and keep you.
The outbreak is focused on the sprawling Shin-Fa-Di market, where more than 10,000 people work. It supplies a massive 80% of Beijing's fresh produce, including meat, seafood and vegetables.
All the infections in this cluster have been traced back to the market in some way. Chinese officials say they're hoping to test up to 200,000 people who visited Shin-Fa-Di in the last 2 weeks, as well as 90,000 residents.
We start in Beijing, where authorities are racing to contain a coronavirus outbreak linked to Asia's biggest wholesale market. All entertainment and indoor sports venues are being closed, and 21 housing estates have been locked down as cases increase. The city had previously seen no signs of the virus for more than 50 days. The outbreak is focused on the sprawling Shin-Fa-Di market, where more than 10,000 people work. It supplies a massive 80% of Beijing's fresh produce, including meat, seafood and vegetables, which come from within China and overseas. Spanning an area nearly the size of 160 football pitches, the market is 20 times larger than the Wuhan market, where it spread from late last year. More cases have also been reported at a second market, Yuchuan Dongsai, several kilometres away. Our China correspondent Stephen McDonald reports.
Residents in large parts of southwestern Beijing are again behind fences, with fears that a second wave of the coronavirus could take hold. Housing estates have been sealed off to all but those who live there. Deliveries must be made to the perimeter fence only. Shops, schools and some public transport have been closed. In Beijing today, dozens of new confirmed coronavirus infections have been added to the tally, which has been growing since the end of last week. It may not sound like many, but it's caused quite some concern, especially when you consider from where the cluster has emanated. The massive Shin-Fa-Di wholesale market, responsible for 80% of the city's vegetables and meat, has been shut for cleaning and testing. All the infections in this cluster have been traced back to the market in some way. Chinese officials say they're hoping to test up to 200,000 people who visited Shin-Fa-Di in the last 2 weeks, as well as 90,000 residents.
In the response to Beijing's cluster, we're seeing the best and worst of China's Communist Party. On the one hand, the speed and the scale of the social isolation of the testing has been something to behold. On the other, the party's also being criticised for going after scapegoats, for dismissing local officials on whose watch the outbreak occurred. If you wanted to guarantee a culture whereby cover-up was your first choice rather than open reporting, there's probably not a better way to do it.
Well, I've been speaking to Professor Ben Cowling, head of epidemiology at the University of Hong Kong. I asked him about the claim that this new outbreak came from a chopping board.
There's virus detected on this particular chopping board. It's not clear how it got there. They've also tested a lot of the meat, the fish, all those kind of samples. They haven't found the virus. So most likely the virus got on the chopping board from the person who was using it.
And they've actually halted the import of salmon from across the globe, and namely from Norway. Is it even possible that it could somehow get into any kind of food or meat, fish?
In theory, it's possible, but it's really, really, really unlikely. And I don't think it's the explanation for this particular outbreak.
So I suppose the question then is, how are you likely to get the one case?
Yeah, we don't know where it came from, but we know there's always the chance for sporadic infections to pop up. Maybe an asymptomatic case who was infected elsewhere in China, traveled to Beijing, didn't even know he had COVID, and spread it into this particular market.
China has been, whether we're given the accurate information, praised for the way it has handled this this outbreak. Since the very beginning in Wuhan, the way that they've locked things down. They've started to ease the lockdown in the last few weeks. Do you think that that has also played a role in it?
It's a good time to lift lockdowns when the case numbers go down to 0, as they have done in much of China. But I think we then recognize there's a risk of infections coming back and a second wave beginning, and that's what it looks like now. But if lockdowns are put back in place, then it will be a very small second wave, much smaller than in many other parts of the world.
So I suppose as many European countries start to open up, should they be looking to China now and worrying?
Certainly, I mean, it does indicate the risk, whether it's after a week or a month, or in this case, after 2 months after their last local case. Infections will come back sooner or later. It doesn't mean that lockdowns are the best thing to do. They are very good for stopping transmission, but they're also very damaging to the economy. So not every country is going to go down that path again.
So could you then help our audience, better understand, as we sort of start to ease things, what are the best practices? I know we've told our audiences these from the very beginning, but what are the best things to do to ensure that, I suppose, you don't catch it and that it is contained?
I think South Korea and Japan are really good models. So they do a lot of testing, they find a lot of cases, and they do test and trace. So they find the contacts and try and stop chains of transmission. They also have everybody avoiding crowded places, wearing masks in public, and those are really important to limit the opportunities of transmission, to slow things down basically, and then to buy time. So South Korea has not had a lockdown at any point in the last few months, and they've managed to keep the case numbers at a low level very successfully. So that's a good model.